Now, this is the Fox 11 News at noon.
A mental health clinic has been opened at USC. This is after 9 deaths of students there beginning in the fall semester. Those deaths are still being investigated, but officials say at least 3 of them were suicides. Suicide is now the second leading cause of death among college students, a statistic that our next guest knows all too well.
Reggie Burton lost his son to suicide 2 years ago. His new book, This is Depression, aims to help families identify and cope when young adult children are struggling. Reggie, thank you so much for being here and spreading the word, because you're really going to save lives and getting this message out.
Thank you for having me. Your stats in your intro said it all. This problem, well, first of all, I wrote the book to personally heal myself and help my family heal. And the other part for writing the book was to also share what we learned through this process of dealing with mental health and depression. My son had a major depressive episode. So in trying to help other people, I had to educate myself on this mental health issue.
So what have you learned over the past 2 years since your son's death in terms of, like, why are we seeing what seems to be this rise in the number of suicides on college campuses?
So what I realized, Bob, is my son was part of a growing statistic that a lot of people don't talk about. 1 out of 4 college students suffers from depression. So in terms of what is causing some of the major depressive episodes and anxiety and depression on campuses, I think it's due in part to you're in a toxic environment. You're having to study, you're having to watch what you eat, you're having to get your sleep. When you don't get your good sleep, then those are times when the problems can exacerbate. With my son, he also dealt with some transitions, transitioning from graduating from college and then going to graduate school. And the thought process behind all of that, what lay ahead for him. So when he had his major depressive episode, all the good things he saw in himself, he no longer saw those things. It was all negative.
Well, I mean, this really goes to the old saying that you can't judge a book by its cover, because we're seeing these pictures of your son, Avery, who's by all accounts a star, academically, athletically. So for parents out there that think that their child is okay, what's your message to them?
So a couple of takeaways, and that's a very good observation. The reason I titled the book This is Depression is I wanted people to realize that depression could happen to anyone. It doesn't discriminate. My son, the old adage, you can't judge a book by its cover, my son looked like he was living the best life. 3.8 GPA, Dean's List, ready for grad school, passes GRE on the first try. But inside of his head and body, he was waging a war. And that was to try to deal with his anxiety and his depression issues. So my message to parents is, instead of, asking, how's it going? Maybe we can switch the conversation up and say, how are you feeling?
In fact, one of his friends did reach out to you briefly and said he had some kind of an episode, and you guys decided not to talk to him about it. What was that about? So
what had happened is one of his friends reached out to us to explain that he was going through some suicide ideation. So he was thinking about committing suicide. So the suicidal thoughts had escalated to that point. And what we tried to do was we tried to do what we normally did when our kids had a problem. We tried to love it away. And in the book, I talk about it at length, that love will not solve that mental health problem. It is something that needs professional help. So that is one of the things I really want parents and other loved ones to understand.
What a message. Yes.
Get professional help. So Reggie will be signing copies of his book tomorrow at the Barnes & Noble at the Del Amo Fashion Center in Torrance from 10 a.m. to noon. Talk about it. You're not alone. And Reggie's there to talk to you about it if you're dealing with these issues.
I'm here to listen.
Thank you so much for spreading the word, as I said, and so sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Thanks, for
Reggie.
having me.
Thanks for coming in.
You bet.